my name is Palma Accardi, and you are watching Tidal Flooding Talk. We are brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition and filmed live every Sunday night at 7 p.m. here at the Irish Pub in Atlantic City.
And I'm meteorologist Dan Skeldon. No football today, so glad to have you guys on. Well, there's a Pro Bowl. Usually doesn't really count, though. It is Sunday, like we said. Tidal Flooding Talk, brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition here at the Irish Pub. We always have a great guest lineup for you. Unlike last week when it was just me.
Sorry about that, Dan.
Lisa Auermuller from the Jacques Cousteau, and I'm going to leave a few of these words out. You can fill in the rest. National Research Reserve. I think I missed two words.
No, you missed one.
You missed the most important one.
Estuarine?
Yes,
All
Estuarine.
Right. See, I wasn't sure how to pronounce it, so I left it out. Lisa, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Palma.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, my name is Lisa Auermuller. I'm the assistant manager at the Jacques Cousteau Reserve. I've worked there since 2002, so 17 years plus at this point.
And where are you from originally?
Upstate New York, right outside Albany.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Yeah, not coastal at all.
Yep, Capital District, right?
Yeah, Capital District, just barely tidal at Troy.
Okay.
So, just barely salty up there. But grew up going to family vacations along the Cape Cod shoreline. Knew I wanted to do something coastal for a career, and took myself through undergrad and then grad school, and ended up with a job at Rutgers working for the Reserve.
Okay, and you've been here ever since.
I have been here ever since.
Which means you must love it, right?
I do love it.
Yeah.
I do love my job.
That's important about any job, right?
It is.
It is.
Yeah.
Now tell us more about the Coastal Research Center that you are now, and
Sure.
you're involved with Rutgers.
Sure.
too.
Yeah. So the Jacques Cousteau Reserve is one of 29 reserves actually around the country. All reserves are federally funded, and they're funded by NOAA, which is our National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the National Weather Service, Dan, I'm sure you know, comes out of NOAA. And then each reserve has a state partner. And for us, that state partner is Rutgers University. And our job at the reserve is to collect science, either ourselves or from other scientists, and translate it and make it understandable to a variety of audiences so that they can make more informed decisions about areas they love or areas they manage, even if they don't have a science-based background. It's my job to be that bridge between the science and people in their decision-making.
Now, were you guys impacted by the shutdown, being involved with NOAA? Were you furloughed for the past 30-something days?
I was not furloughed, so we're Rutgers employees, and so the money comes through Rutgers. But many of our colleagues that work at the federal level and that provide federal oversight for us were. And I can tell you that when I tried to go on a couple of the federal websites early in the shutdown, I usually go on NOAA's Digital Coast website to download training modules or coastal flood models. That website wasn't working for a while, and so that impacted my job.
Yeah, my favorite one is to get the water temperature off of South Jersey. That one was down as well, so I had to go elsewhere for it. So glad to have the government back open again. Glad to have everyone working once again. Coming from Troy then, and then moving to New Jersey, like, have you been aware of tidal flooding, like in a tidal flooding episode? You know, when you're up in Troy, I grew up in interior New England and had no idea what tidal flooding was until I came here. Was it something that you knew you were getting into, or what was your first tidal flooding experience like?
So definitely growing up, I didn't pay any attention, and it was during family vacations, you might have paid attention to the tide going up and down the rack line. It really wasn't until I got into school that it all started to make sense, how the tides and the moon and the cycle and the 2 highs a day and the 2 lows a day, how that all makes sense. I'd say since I've had a career in the coastal field and the marine science field, and we've seen so much tidal flooding change over time, especially living in Little Egg Harbor, where tidal flooding is becoming more and more of a reality. And our marine field station for Rutgers is on Great Bay Boulevard in Little Egg Harbor, which is locally known as Seven Bridges Road. We are getting more and more flooding all the time. And so it's become, I think, not just a scientific reality, but sort of a general reality for people living along the coast.
Now, you mentioned sort of that you have to translate some of these scientific discoveries with our coast to city officials and even state officials. What do you think are some of the most important aspects of doing that, and what are the most important things that you are telling these people?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what's most important is that the people that are charged with making really important decisions about our coast have scientific information as one of the factors that they use in their decision making. We know that science isn't the most important factor for everybody. There's taxes, there's making sure that people are healthy, there's all local businesses, there's all sorts of factors. But as long as the people charged with making the decisions are at least aware of what science is happening in their backyard and that they understand it. So sometimes people can get really scared about science. They see tables, they see graphs, they just shut down. It doesn't make sense. If we can provide it to them in a way that makes it feel very local to them, very relevant to their own backyard, and an important part of what their community is and what it means, then I feel like we've done our job.
Do you think people are becoming more aware of the threat of tidal flooding, of the occurrence, especially as you said? I mean, you don't have to live in the most flood-prone area of any island to know, all right, it's occurring a little bit more now. It's becoming more commonplace. We kind of have to adapt to the fact that it is kind of the new reality. Not the major events necessarily, but at least the minor to moderate events. So do you think word is getting out there that, okay, this is the new norm?
Yeah, I think all of us that work in government, the state government, and bail us out, we all have to be a part of this. So I think Sandy was a major tipping point in terms of the conversation around flooding. I think people think that Sandy and all the stuff that washed in the water has this displacement effect and has made more and more flooding, which we know scientifically isn't accurate in that way, but the Atlantic City tide gauge will tell us that the tidal level has risen more than a foot in the past 100 years. And so it's those sort of scientific data where if people aren't living near the coast and they're not seeing it every day, at least we have long-term data sets like that to show us that there is a difference. Your eyes are not deceiving you. This is really changing.
And that's why I think that outreach is so important. And since you started in 2002 and you've seen Sandy, what role do you think social media and outreach about flooding has in our area?
I think probably the social media aspect has been one of the largest factors in terms of making it a community conversation. The fact that you can take a photo of a trouble spot in your community, you can upload it to a web link, you can put a comment on it, you can maybe even hold your local mayor or committee people accountable for what's happening, or you can help improve your own community's hazard mitigation plan by saying, here are the trouble spots in our area. Certainly there's the really effectual side of the part of social media where post-storm people were reunited with lost materials they had or pictures, and I think that part's really, really an amazing part of social media as well. But the ability to connect across the community or across multiple communities or along our whole coast and realize that it's not just our backyard, it is the whole coastal system where things are changing, and then feel like we're all part of the stewardship of doing something about it, I think has been a huge part of the social media.
Do you run into, because I know on social media as a meteorologist, I run into, in a good way, combativeness sometimes. People that
in a
will,
good way.
In a good way, because I do think constructive criticism makes you stronger, and not everyone is going to accept everything that you are saying. So, do you run into any people who are confused, people who are in denial that it's not happening, people who it's very rare that you get 100% acceptance for what you're trying to educate. Sometimes people fight back a little bit. Do you encounter that at all in your education travels?
Well, just like you guys, yes, of course, that happens often. Everybody has a different opinion. Again, just like I said earlier, we all take in different factors when we make decisions and with the way we see the world. And so people do perceive things from all different perspectives, and I think it's our job as a reserve and as a federally funded agency and as a university to stay really neutral about what we're talking about. We're not ever at a place to get into a debate about something or to say you're wrong or I'm right. We're there to say, here's what the science is.
Right.
I'm not here to tell you what to do about your decision, but really here is the background, and here's how you, here are the things you need to think about when making your decision. I do try to take opportunities like having someone disagree with my opinion to try to at least find a common ground. What is there something about this topic that we both really care about? Maybe it's clean water. Maybe it's having a place for our children to be able to enjoy in the future. I think starting from a common place with people helps break down barriers, because you can see at least you're all working towards the same thing. You may come at it differently, but at the end you're all trying for the same thing.
Now, in 2015, you were presented with an award from the NJAFM, which is the New Jersey Association for Floodplain Managers. They hold a conference every year right here in Atlantic City. Could you tell us about that award and why you were honored with such an award?
Yeah, well, I know Dan's also been a recipient of the award from the floodplain. Oh, wow!
So we're 3 for 3.
Yeah, we're a trifecta.
Thank you, NJAFM.
In fact, Palma's the current holder.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that award was for all the work that we had done post-Sandy, my colleagues and I. A huge shout out to the 2 coastal resilience specialists who I worked with post-Sandy, Jenna Gatto and Chris Huck. Chris has been on the show before, I know.
I believe
Yeah, okay,
yes.
so they've both been on, and the association was recognizing all the work we did in helping to increase resilience and preparedness and mitigation for the communities we worked with, and for helping them recognize things like scoring more points through the community rating system, saving money for the taxpayers, things everybody can agree about.
Right.
I will add that the Reserve also got an award from the Floodplain Management Association before that as well. I think it was back in 2006, and that award...
So before Sandy.
Yeah. So we've been viewed for many years as a go-to place for training for construction code officials and floodplain managers, hosting a number of certified floodplain management trainings, and working with the Department of Environmental Protection's Floodplain Bureau. So we were recognized back then for doing a number of trainings for free for that audience like yourself, Palma, who need to have this science to help them do their day-to-day job.
All right, let's say hi to some viewers on this Sunday evening. Kristen Kaiser, regular viewer, nice to have you on. Nicole Accardi, Tony Picciota, hi to you. Joe Martucci, meteorologist, former guest here, getting ready for some Arctic gear later this week. Joe, nice to have you on. Lawrence Monaco, hi to you. Susan DeRoss, Greg D'Ambrosio, Carl Dam asked a question. Do you think that people living in flood-prone areas should look more to protecting property by getting houses up high and maybe even build barriers like dikes, etc., or is it your position that, and of course the question cuts off. Take it the rest of the question. Well, take that part of the question. I mean, so what should people in flood-prone areas do as far as protecting property?
So
goes?
This was from a guy named Carl. Is that
Carl,
right?
Yes.
So Carl, my answer for that is, number one, I wouldn't take a position on it because it's not my job to take a position. But I would say, if you are looking to raise your home, certainly know what your base flood elevation is at your house. Know that our state requires a 1-foot mandatory freeboard above that base flood. So you'd want to absolutely do an additional foot above that. And being aware that our tidal flooding is increasing and is going to continue to increase, maybe even at a higher rate. Adding a few extra feet of freeboard is not only a good safety measure, but also one that will help save you money on your flood insurance. The other thing I would say, Carl, is that taking personal matters in terms of flood mitigation is a great idea, But remember that if your home is up in the air, but everything around you in your community is still low and very vulnerable, like your roadways or your pump stations, you might be safe, but people might not be able to get to you, or you might not be able to get out. And don't think that a home elevated gives you a false sense of security during an event. You still want to make sure you evacuate, you still want to follow all those rules, because you might not be able to get out if the roads surrounding your home are still very low lying.
Good point. Yeah,
That's a good point. I never really thought of it that way, that it might, kind of trick somebody, not trick, but they'll assume that they're safe just because their home is so much higher to actually stay there in the event of a storm.
Many local emergency managers that I talk with and work with actually are very fearful that in a post-Sandy world with so much emphasis on home elevations, which is a great thing, that people are going to have a false sense and then not evacuate in the future.
And we already have troubles getting people to 100% evacuate now, and now with more homes considered, storm safer, I guess, if you will, by being elevated. Right, yeah. Resilient, that's the word. Yeah. You might have more problems. And that's a huge problem for emergency managers and meteorologists trying to convey people, all right, you have to get out. But you raise a good point, because, your house may be fine, but electricity, roads, emergency services, there might be so many problems in your community because it's not storm ready. Right. So the rest of Carl's question was, or is it your position that people should just get out of these areas?
So it's sort of both. Your answer is
right.
Sort of both. Yes, get out in the event of a storm. However, it is mostly beneficial to elevate.
My guess is that Carl's probably thinking in the longer term, not just with a storm that comes in and out, but
leaving these areas permanently, which I know we don't. I mean, you said you don't, and I know we don't take positions on. If you choose to live in these areas, know the risks, but you don't have to abandon these areas.
And when we work with local communities and help them understand what their decisions could be, what options they have, obviously moving away from the water, retreat is one of those options, but so is mitigation, or trying to protect yourself from the water, and then living with the water, just accepting the fact that the water is going to be there, that you're going to have to move your car on tides, that you're going to have to change your lifestyle. And so, there's a variety of choices people can make.
Right, and it's important to know from a meteorology standpoint that these major floods, these Sandys, you might get, you might have back-to-back years of major floods, or you may go 20 years without a major flood. I mean, there's something there that aren't regular every year features, but the nuisance, the minor, the moderate flooding, that's the stuff that's increasing in frequency, with each decade that passes.
Yeah, and stuff that's so hard to explain to people. That these 100-year storms, or Sandy was a 100-year storm in one place, but a 300-year storm in another place, and a 500-year. I mean, it's complicated.
Right, and those numbers are good. Like a 100-year storm, it conveys, all right, it happens once every 100 years, but that doesn't mean that, okay, once you have your 100-year storm, you don't have to worry for another 100 years, because you can have a 100-year storm 2 years in a row, and then not have it for 200 years, and it's still the 100-year storm, because 200 divided by 2 is 100. So yeah, those numbers are a little misleading, and they're just averages, and they aren't to be taken.
Yeah, it's really
verbatim.
More about probability. Really, the probability that you would have that.
Well, on behalf of the people that are scared of graphs, and what else did you say?
Charts and graphs.
I do want to thank both of you, for conveying this information in such an understandable way for people that aren't scientists. So.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Is there any other advice you might have for residents or even visitors of our coastal community on how to stay more informed about these things or make their homes more resilient?
I think, so coastal areas do have the year-round residents. They have visitors. And I think as residents full-time living in an area, making sure that your community works with visitors, that sort of that seasonal, the people that come in for a week and leave. I know Long Beach Island, which is near where I live, they had an incident with flooding that happened due to a high full moon tide. Lots of visitors parked around Beach Haven, which is where Fantasy Island is, a huge tourist destination, and they were just not aware that flooding was pretty chronic there. So tons of cars got damaged, and so I think whatever communities can do to not only make sure their full-time residents are safe, but these residents that really, they love to be at the beach because that's their traditional place to go, but don't really fully comprehend the power of the fact that on these barrier islands, you've got water on this side, you've got water on that side, and there's usually not a lot of land in between.
Right. And you can't fault the visitors because,
No.
you know, they're just vacationing. Summertime is a minimum for tidal flooding unless
And
you
it's
have
a
a
fun
major
time.
storm. It's
We
an absolutely
should-
fun time.
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, or even
Right.
higher than that, they're not going to see any flooding. And I know when I moved to Ocean City, for instance, and this is true in a lot of barrier islands, when a flood was coming, they said, move to the ocean. And that made no sense to me.
Right.
Park along the ocean. In fact, Roger Cope asked a question, would it be a good idea to park your vehicle near the beach if we know it's going to flood? And not every island's the same, but I can speak for Ocean City. You know, that's the highest point on the island, is the ocean side, when it's kind of counterintuitive. All right, I'm going to park right near the ocean, and my car is going to be safe. And the car the farthest from the ocean, near the bay, where a lot of the flooding comes from, that's where you're actually most flood prone. But I know every island's different.
Yeah, and those dunes do an awesome job naturally protecting the homes behind them, especially planted dunes do that. And when you look at tidal flooding maps and you see the flooding coming from the back bay area, it is surprising to people that they think it reaches over the dunes and comes through the ocean because the power's there with the waves, but it's really this back bay flooding that I think catches a lot of people by surprise when you're not used to it.
Right, so that's where education again is key. You know, locals know more so than visitors, but I think there's room for increased education amongst both.
And I think in your job, especially Dan, I'm sure you do a lot of that, just trying to communicate that sort of thing.
Yeah, and a lot of people that are on Dan's Facebook will ask about specific areas too.
Right.
And the New Jersey Coastal Coalition just partnered with Ocean First Bank, right?
Yes.
And we have a camera now in Sea Isle of a very flood-prone area, I guess one of their hot spots, to show people, hey, they could just check, am I able to drive through there, or am I able to park over there, just from a webcam based there. So.
And we're hoping, I think, more of these cameras now. I mean, there's webcams everywhere. I mean, in a tourist sense, there's so many boardwalk cams up and down the Jersey Shore. If we can put these cameras in flooding hotspots and let people see, now if they evacuated, they're waiting to come home, or you know, they're on the island, they want to know how bad it is, it's a simple click away.
Yeah, and as a scientist, I think not only is it good education and communication for the public, if it's collecting data all the time about flooding, it's also another data set about where the water, what level the water's at, or at what extent it's flooded. So it serves a couple of great purposes, actually.
Absolutely.
Any more Facebook comments or questions?
Dan McLean says a lot of people seem to be not aware of flooding, especially tourists. I think we hit on that, Dan. You're absolutely right. And again, it's not a fault to the tourists. I actually got a little, I'll say constructive criticism, saying hey, you can't pick on the tourists because they don't know. And I'm not. I'm just saying, and I think you guys all said it too, you know, it's just that, hey, anywhere you go that you're a visitor and not a regular, you don't know the roads as well, you don't know the shortcuts, you don't know, you know, the best stores or the best restaurants, and you also don't know the flood-prone areas.
Especially when, I mean, there are a lot of visitors that are there every single summer, but if you're just visiting for a week and you're never really there, you really don't know. I mean, I've taken vacations and I would never know if there's any specific flooding that's going to occur, you know, especially if you're not friendly with the neighbors because you don't ever live there. How would you know?
And I will tell you too that every storm is different. Like a northeast wind will do one thing, an easterly wind will do another thing. So you know, different parts of the island will flood in different storms with different winds. So
throw a full moon in there, and then all bets are off.
Absolutely. All right, I think that's it for questions and comments, guys. And again, we are brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition, 7 p.m. every Sunday night. We always hope to be joined by a great guest like Lisa here, and you know, talk tidal flooding. You can come on down to the Irish Pub and join us live. Have some food and drink afterwards, or of course, just listen in and join the conversation on Facebook.
Now, do you have a specific website or maybe Facebook that people could look to see what sort of new developments are happening?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking. Our reserves website is www.jcnerr for Jacques Cousteau National Estuarine Research
I'm glad
Reserve.
they don't spell it out.
The E word's the most important, yes.
.org, and then we also have a Facebook page, which is facebook.com/jcnerr. And thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
And are those reserve centers all coastal, or are they throughout the country?
Here is a very, very unknown fact, I think little known fact, that we also have estuarine reserves in the Great Lakes.
Okay.
Because the Great Lakes are such large water bodies, they actually have tidal influence due to the moon, and they get very large waves, so it's not just saltwater coastal, it's also freshwater coastal.
I lived on Lake Superior in Upper Michigan for 2 years, and got to convince my mom it's almost ocean-like. You know, I sent her video of the waves and the tides, and people don't think that. You're right, living on the Great Lakes.
I just visited there for the first time this fall and saw a pretty significant lake storm with waves.
Yep.
I felt like I was at Jersey Shore Beach.
Yeah, I mean, the waves can get 30, 40 feet high. If you guys are Gordon Lightfoot song, I know our director Tom Quirk will know it. The wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald.
Yes,
it's from
they
his
talked
era.
about
That was like a massive storm that sunk this huge Great Lakes iron ore ship. And Great Lakes, big storm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so that is a little known fact that those are coastal areas as well.
I learned that as well. All right, okay. Well, Lisa Auermuller, our guest, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Dan.
Appreciate
Thanks,
having you.
And before we end the show, we want to present you with an Irish Pub t-shirt.
Oh, thank you guys. How awesome.
And thank you for coming down.
Wow, perfect for St. Patrick's Day.
There's only one Irish pub. None of those in the Great Lakes. You have to come to Atlantic City and visit the Irish Pub right here in St. James Place.
Thank you both very much. It was great to be with you.
All right, thanks, guys. We'll see you next Sunday night, 7 p.m.